Welcome back to Gaming with Spoons. Today on the channel, we're going to be taking a look at one of the video game's most beloved video game franchises, and this is the Chrono Series. Now, Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross are two amazing RPGs. Most people will tell you that Chrono Trigger is one of the best games ever made, and rightly so. Chrono Trigger deserves a spot in history among one of the most amazing games ever developed. But before we get on this video, I do just want to briefly mention that this is going to be a 4-part video, as nobody wants to sit here and hear me ramble on about Chrono Trigger for 2 hours. So with that being said, let's hop into part 1 and talk about Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is held to be one of gaming's most classic games. Any video game publication site, YouTube Top 10 is going to have this among their top 10 RPGs of all time. And for good reason. Chrono Trigger was very influential in a lot of ways, very much ahead of its time, if you will. Chrono Trigger was one of the first games to really eliminate the need for random battle, being able to have your enemies set up on the field and being able to see them, encounter them, and then eliminate the battle screen, making battles take place in the area that you were at. This was all very ahead of its time. Even the Final Fantasy franchise, Square Enix's staple franchise, hadn't been able to incorporate these things into its gameplay system just yet. So it was very different, and something that a lot of other Japanese games would eventually go in to follow suit, as that's almost just kind of become a staple at this point, being able to see your enemies out there on the field. But Chrono Trigger also took it a step further by introducing some gameplay mechanics that definitely helped it stand out, such as the radius of different attacks that you could do. You had your text that would only fit into one area, so maybe waiting for your enemies to move into one area and say unleash Chrono Cyclone, so we'd spin around in a circle. Taking out those enemies was something that not a lot of games at that time were doing. And then of course we had the ability to be able to combine attacks and things like that together. This really kind of gave Chrono Trigger its distinct edge and allowed it to stand out from Square Enix's Final Fantasy, or at the time Squaresoft's Final Fantasy. But if we are going to talk about one thing that I think everybody universally agrees with Chrono Trigger for being one of the best games ever created, that would be its story. Not only is Chrono Trigger one of the few games that has really tried to tackle time travel or have some type of time variance going into its plot, it was one of the only games that has been officially been able to go in and succeed in building this up. And I think we really have to give it praise and accomplishment for what that is. Now, going into this video, doing some research on this, I came across a YouTube video, which I'm going to link down below and put an annotation up there at top that you guys need to check out. In this video, he goes in to elaborate how Chrono Trigger is almost two different games. While the one scenario takes us on essentially what is a tour through the planet's life, up into the point of its destruction and the imminent future that happened as a result of Lavos, the game really takes all these different time periods and is able to blend it together very well. And it's because of this that Chrono Trigger doesn't stop. It doesn't slow down. It continues to pull punches and keep that narrative going. Now, we all know how Chrono Trigger starts out. Chrono and Maro meet in the Millennial Fair. They go to Luca's invention. Luca's invention interacts with Maro's pendant. She's whisked off to the Middle Ages, where she's mistaken for Queen Lean, and Chrono goes on an adventure to try and save her. It is here that Chrono meets up with Frog. They go off to save the actual queen from the Mystics, and that leads to Chrono going back into his time to be put on trial, thrown in prison, where Luca busts him out, Maro goes with them, and they make their eventual way into the future, where they learn that their world is going to be destroyed by an alien parasitic life form that's feeding off of the planet known as Lavos. Now, Lavos serves as the main antagonist for this game, the crux of the reason that they are going off on this adventure. Along the way, they meet up with a robot deemed Robo, and he goes on their adventure with them. But Chrono Trigger's story doesn't stop there. Once they learn that Lavos is going to destroy the world, they end up going through the Hecarim Cave, eventually make their way to talk to Melchior, and learn of a dagger known as the Redstone, which allows them to essentially be able to create this sword called the Masamune in order to destroy Magus, because Magus is supposedly the one who created Lavos. Now, the beauty of it is when they go back to the Middle Ages, and a few time has passed, Xenon Bridge has been fixed. As Xenon Bridge had been destroyed, they've now been able to fix it. But why does the player just simply accept the fact that it's okay? Most RPGs would have you go on some tedious task to maybe pick up some parts to fix this bridge, or maybe help out with repairs to the bridge to kind of pass the time. Because of Chrono Trigger being able to use time travel to its advantage, we're able to go in and have this game's plot essentially piece out some of the boring parts that would otherwise keep it in there. It always keeps that story flowing and continuously goes in to conclude different parts, such as once you beat Magus and go into the lair of Tyranno Lair, and you instantly get your ending to that. But we were just there one quest before trying to get the Redstone. Why do players fix that? Because Magus's castle prolonged for very long. It felt like a very satisfying explanation. Chrono Trigger really sets up in itself at this point, and the point I'm trying to make is that it sets up itself very much to only tell the highlights of what was going on with Lavos, the big parts of history that continually helped propel that forward. And Lavos becomes the main central crux of the plot, and that's why it works so well. Chrono Trigger is able to jump along to different time periods by keeping its story very simplistic, but yet each and every one of those time periods have a very complex narrative that's already been driven into the game, giving us just that little bit of a glimpse as to what has gone on inside of this world, and gives us just enough information about the background and scenario to keep us wanting to know more without necessarily taking it away. Now, this in writing is what they call the Iceberg Effect. Being a writer myself, I'm going to explain this to you. Most readers are only if this is our water and this is the tip of the iceberg, most readers are only going to get what the author wants them to get to hear. And when it comes to the story, you only get what is above water. Now, me as the writer, it is my job to be able to know all the history, all the lore, everything that's happened in this world. There are potentially things that I'm not going to necessarily reveal to you, but things will eventually kind of start to come out on the tip of the iceberg as I see fit. And that's kind of what Chrono Trigger's story has been able to do. Again, go check out that video because he explains it a hell of a lot better than I will. But Chrono Trigger is loved because of its story, and it is such an amazing game. One thing Chrono Trigger did that I really feel like a lot more Japanese developers need to do is in ways emulate the way that Chrono Trigger goes about telling a story, keeping it simplistic, yet very, very complex in its different types of scenarios. And it was that gameplay and simplicity of its story that I think helped make it really, really great. Another thing Chrono Trigger did that I absolutely thought was very, very cool was after the whole thing with Zill goes on and that whole thing happens, you essentially have the option to beat the game whenever you want. You don't have to go through and do all these side quests to help you power up to defeat Lavos. By going into these different side quests, you gain certain materials that are going to make you stronger. They're going to help you be able to not only grind, but get items that are going to make your battle with Lados a lot easier. Chrono Trigger very much sets itself up to allow these side quests to go in and tell very different narratives, completing a lot of different character arcs. And this is really brilliant in that fact, because not only are we being able to go in and get these materials and these items needed to beat it, it is bringing the character's story to a close. It is being able to go in and essentially give us more detail and plot of what's going on, an understanding of each and every one of these characters, almost essentially ending their character growth while simultaneously adding more of an in-depth story to the world, expanding a little bit on those narratives that were introduced and reintroduced throughout the game. Now, if you haven't played Chrono Trigger, there are a few ways that you can go about doing it. Back there on my shelf, right there is the Final Fantasy Chronicles collection that comes on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation, sorry, with Final Fantasy 4 and Chrono Trigger. There's also the DS remake right up there. That game in of itself, I think, is the best way to play it, considering that it does add some additional side quests and some additional endings that are going to help tie it into Chrono Cross. You can also pick up that game on your PlayStation Vita, PlayStation 3, and PSP through the Chronicles, through the Final Fantasy Chronicles namesake. You can download that game singly. So there are ways to go about playing this. There is a port on Steam, and mobile, but those aren't the greatest versions to unfortunately play. But if it is the way you want to go about it, hey, at least you're being able to experience the game. And, well, I hate to say it, but you can't experience in those ways. Just emulate the son of a bitch, because it's a game you do need to play. Now, Chrono Trigger is among one of my favorite RPGs of all time. There's only a few other RPGs that beat it out, and one of those is Chrono Cross right there. And I love Chrono Cross. I love Chrono Trigger. Chrono Cross couldn't exist without Chrono Trigger. But what is it about Chrono Cross that I love a little bit more? Well, you're just going to have to stay tuned and find out in part 2 of this series. You guys have been watching Gaming with Spoons. Be sure to hit subscribe there for me to keep up to date with all of my content. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Links are going to be down below in that description box. And most importantly, stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoons is checking out.